Okay, as far as episodes go, I know for the past couple of episodes they've been very inclined towards one gender or the other, but I feel like this particular episode just hits at both, even though it's a little bit different. Because on one end, it's like I'm talking to the babes, but on the other end, it's like I'm trying to talk to the fellas. Although, weirdly enough, the main theme of this episode is actually men and money. And I think, if I'm not wrong, this is probably the most diverse episode that I've done in terms of the kind of guys that I'm talking about and also the kind of guys that I'm talking to. But before I get to the criticism and the advice, I want us to start things off from a very light, or should I say a very tiny note, by talking about handbags. Now, I know handbags aren't a particularly guy thing, it's just that I felt that there was this one handbag that I felt was just the right size for just about every guy to carry. And it was made by a company called Mischief. Now, Mischief has made a microscopic handbag that is quote unquote smaller than a grain of salt. I kid you the hell not. It actually exists. They made it and they recently sold it for, get this, $63,750, which in Kenyan money, since someone did the conversion, is 8.9 million. 8.9 million for a bag. Like, this shit is so tiny it couldn't even carry Audacity. Like, what the fuck is it supposed to hold? An L?
Get ready for the battle of the sexes.
I'm honestly wondering who it is that decided that they're going to spend $63,000, okay, practically $64,000 on a handbag that they probably can't even see. Like, I've actually looked at the image of the handbag itself, and by the time you are getting to actually spot what the handbag looks like in its faintest form, you can actually see the fingerprints on someone's finger. Like, it is so tiny that I'm actually wondering how it was made and who the hell was dumb enough to pay for it. Because when you look at its size, it's actually quite literally smaller than a grain of salt. And when you kind of look at the whole sizing of it, like, there's nothing that it could carry, because if it's smaller than a grain of salt, it can't even carry a grain of salt. So, you know, at least whatever it is that'll carry it won't be as salty. But also, when you kind of look at its size, it's probably the one handbag that every single person's boyfriend wouldn't mind carrying. But at the same time, we'd probably also mind carrying it because we wouldn't really be able to hold hands with anyone, because if someone greets us, we forget that it's on our finger. Damn it, it's lost. Someone's jacked our handbag. I feel like the best way I'd probably ever secure the bag is if I was holding it and then I decided to finger a babe. But that's sort of besides the point. The bigger issue is that someone actually paid for it. Now, the caption where I got the story from says, and I quote, "A microscopic handbag smaller than a grain of salt has been sold for $63,750 at auction. A microscope is needed to view the bag's design, with a tiny object measuring 657 times 222 times 700 micrometers. Art Collective Mischief, based in Brooklyn, is known for its controversial design. They include shoes that contain human blood, trainers with holy water in the soles, a cologne that smells like WD-40, and giant red rubber boots." End quote. And okay, unfortunately they didn't tell us who exactly bought it, but I'd honestly want to meet the person and ask them questions like, is this your demonstration of the term little things matter? Or are you trying to prep it for some ant that you've been hitting on for the past couple of years? Pun intended. Or, not pun intended. I don't even know why the hell I said that. Either way, I feel like this story is a little too small to address, so I'm going to leave it at that because I have more important things to discuss and kick off this podcast in a slightly better way, where I start by saying, welcome to Break Time on West Side, your number one breakdown podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. The man on the mic is a man who believes he has found the one bag that he can fumble, because clearly it can't even hold these nuts. He is a man who still wonders why bikini bottoms were in a cartoon. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. The show is Battle of the Sexes, our weekly love, sex, and relationship show, where I get to talk about small bags. I get to talk about big bags a little bit later on. I get to talk about babes being shuffled around here and there. Sometimes someone might disagree, but usually I like to come through with that conclusion. And if you agree with it, if you don't agree with it, then at Breaktime on Westside on Facebook or on IG is where you can reach me at. The DMs are always open. On Twitter, you can slide into my personal DMs, which is at Bagaka the D. My personal socials are also there at Denver Bagaka on IG if you want to DM me directly. And I usually have all of that in the description in case you don't know how to spell any of them. But with that said, I do appreciate each and every one of you that listens to the episodes. If you can give it a nice follow, a nice review, a subscription, or a 5-star rating on whichever app you're using to listen, I would appreciate it immensely. Helps me go up the charts, helps me get recommended to more and more people, and we can expand the number of people that listen to this podcast. But all that said and done, I do want to get into our main topic of today, which is actually going to involve some foreign men that we like to refer to as passport bros. But before I get into that, I want to discuss someone who was passported out before the term passport bros really became a thing, and before the whole concept of the passport bros actually was actually a thing. And the person that I'm going to talk about is none other than Charlene Anyango. Now, for those of y'all that were in Kenya around the 2020, around COVID time, y'all must have gotten to know this babe because she really did throw it back on IG during Club COVID. But that shit came back to bite her. But to give a little bit of context into who she is, she's a Kenyan babe that is known for shaking ass. Let me just put it like that. I don't know if I can really call her an influencer. I think she's just famous for having a big ass and knowing how to shake it. She ended up getting together with some white dude from the States. She ended up moving to the States, stayed there for a while, and apparently she came back not too long ago. And in a very recent interview, she did speak on her not getting together with this guy officially and getting married. And she claims that when she was about to get married to this dude, the dude and the family, well, more so the family, decided to look her up, Googled her name, and found out about the whole Club COVID thing, how she was charging people for private exotic dances and shit. And they were like, you know what, she ain't worth it, drop the bitch, this shit ain't happening. And of course, when a couple of Kenyan people heard about this shit, they went on to social media and they were talking about, blah, 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 walking red flag, blah, blah. The chickens finally come home to roost. But I feel like this shit is fairly self-explanatory at this point. People out here busy thinking that just because Kim K managed to do the sex tape and she's famous now, that they can do the same thing and get away with it in this age of the internet where every single thing is pretty much ending up on the internet. I tend to think that a lot of people aren't very smart about it, because the reality of it is, the moment you put it on the internet, it's on the internet forever. You can say that it's been deleted, you can say that you've cleared it, but there's someone that'll just go and unearth that shit from some other place, or some other person will have recorded it through some way, shape or form, and then they might just choose to bring it back out again. And to be very honest, I'm not even going to comment on her past and whatever the hell she did, but I do think that if she was going to be with this guy and she did intend on getting married, and I'm sure that the guy must have mentioned that, my parents and my family might want to do some due diligence, that she probably should have prepped for that shit and just told them, by the way, or at least told the dude, by the way, this is what I used to do before. I'm a changed person now. I'm a different person. This isn't something that I want to do. But, this is what your parents might find. And if that was the case, I tend to think that the boyfriend probably could have prepped for it and he'd have been ready with the rebuttals and the proper answers to give. Because if you're aware of the problems that might come up if someone chooses to dig up shit from your past and you are ready for it, then you know what answers to give. But if you're not ready and someone brings that shit up, how the fuck do you expect to be defended? You kind of have to ask yourself these questions every so often, because when you look at a lot of shit that's posted up online, a lot of times you find that shit just stays there forever. And yes, you can choose to take one thing down, you can choose to put up something else, you can choose to rebrand yourself however which way, but at the end of the day, there is going to be some shit that you posted up online that's gonna be in the memory of someone else, and they can choose to unearth that shit right when you least expect it. So being prepared for a lot of that shit is definitely something that I think a lot of people nowadays are still struggling to accept. It's like nudes. Today's day and age, after all of these years of people practicing with nudes, people pretty much sending nudes and having them leaked, you're still seeing people sending each other nudes via regular WhatsApp message. or by regular, I don't know, IG DMs or some shit. You're seeing people sending each other nudes, and it's not like with self-deleting messages or single view only or none screenshot. Like, no special features to prevent that information from being captured. And then all of a sudden, when they hear that someone's nudes have been leaked, or they hear that, oh, you know, like your nudes could be leaked and shit, all of a sudden they're like, oh my goodness, how can this happen? How can this happen? Like, I tend to think that a lot of us millennials did a lot of this crawling and went through a bunch of this BS so that the app companies can make these changes so that a lot of other people can like run when they're interested in such shit. But weirdly enough, I tend to see a lot of the older folk, older stage millennials, Gen Xers and shit, like a lot of them will send nudes. I also see young people sending each other nudes, which makes no sense whatsoever. But at the end of the day, if people want to dig their own graves, they might as well do that shit. It's just that, you know, it always comes back to bite you if it's on the internet. Although, then again, considering that it's not my babe, considering that they're not my kids, I really can't say too much more than just do your best and protect yourself and stop being so sloppy with this shit. And after leaving it at that, I can move things on because we do have a main topic to get to. Now, I can remember not too long ago, someone was asking me about passport bros. They were asking me my thoughts on it and whether I think they're a problem. Because passport bros, in as much as people were talking about them on the internet going to countries like the Philippines or Brazil or some shit, there were actually some that were coming to Kenya. And they had sort of noticed that there were a lot more guys that were checking into Kenya, busy talking about looking for a babe or, you know, talking about how they found a babe that they're settling down with and shit. And when I was being asked that, my answers were particularly simple. At the time, I was like, you know what? I kind of did feel something about it initially because, you know, oh, you know, you're coming for our babes and you're messing up the market. But after a bit of a while thinking about it, I was like, you know what? They might as well go and do their thing because at the end of the day, I don't think they're getting the best quality babes that this country has to offer. Not necessarily in terms of beauty or in terms of like, you know, whether they have a nice body or some shit. Like just overall packages in terms of like the looks, the values, and you know what it is that they have to offer as people. And over time, I've actually seen that to be more true than I even thought possible because the stories that I've been reading online of late about like dudes that are from another country, more so a first world country, and trying to date a babe in Kenya and them having issues, it's almost like they've been attracting pretty much the same crop of women, and it's literally all of these first world guys that are trying to find a relationship with someone here in Kenya. Like, it's an interesting thing to encounter, and more so in the wake of the whole passport bros thing. And to be honest, in as much as yes, it is in one way or another a passport bros move, like I do feel like these guys actually didn't entirely understand that this whole passport bros thing could be turned against them. And to explain this further, I'm gonna read a post that I got from Reddit under the Kenyan subreddit where a black British man was busy complaining about the financial expectations of his Kenyan babe. Now, he says, and I quote, "I am a black British engaged to a Kenyan girl who I am in a long distance relationship with, but we seem to have differing expectations when it comes to financial responsibilities. Here's my dilemma. My fiancé and I have been together for quite some time, and as we started planning our future together, I noticed that she has certain expectations regarding money. It seems like she believes I should be solely responsible for paying for everything from daily expenses to extravagant purchases. While I understand the traditional notion of being the provider, I feel overwhelmed by this expectation, as I believe in a more balanced approach to financial matters. I genuinely love her and want to build a strong foundation for our future together, but this financial strain is causing some unease. I believe a relationship should be based on mutual support and shared responsibilities, including financial ones. Just this morning, she sent me this text. In a stable relationship and in marriage, we ask our men for money because it makes us see the man as a superman. When you give us money, we not only see you as a provider, but literally as a man who can do anything for us. We feel loved, protected, and special. This is for all women on earth, no matter how much one is earning." End quote. Is this the norm in Kenya? Do Kenyan women expect a man to be the provider? Looking forward to hearing your thoughts. End quote. And end of the post. Now, when I saw this, actually, this is the second article, if not the third, that I was seeing on the Kenyan subreddit, whereby it was a guy that was busy complaining about a Kenyan babe and financial obligations, yet they're in a long distance relationship. This guy's in a foreign country, and it's primarily a first world one. There was actually a recently deleted one that I saw not too long ago, where this babe had just been asking for money. I don't know, money to start a business, money to set up the house, money to pay for rent and shit. And the number of posts that I've seen about that is almost becoming like ridiculously common occurrence, which kind of brings me to the whole decision to want to talk about the whole passport bros thing, of which I'm sure that there's a couple of y'all that probably don't know what a passport bro or what the whole concept of the passport bros is. And to kind of put it into perspective, the whole term passport bros is a term that's used for men that will leave the country, and it's normally a first world country, go to a poorer or just a third world country in the hopes of getting a more traditional, more submissive woman to make their wife. And normally whenever they're doing this, the whole hope is they pretty much find a babe from a third world country, they start having some sort of relationship with them, they marry them, they bring them to their country, and they settle down with them. And all of this is in hopes of trying to get a woman who is submissive, respectable, and will treat them like some sort of, I don't know, king or small god or some shit. Although I think that last part is just my exaggeration. But essentially, that's pretty much what a lot of passport bros do. Now, there are quite a number of them that when asked why it is that they do this instead of marrying from within their own country or closer to their borders, they normally talk about how modern women are not as submissive, they're not as feminine. A lot of them tend to have very masculine energy and they're very confrontational and argumentative, blah blah, feminism, blah blah. And as a result of that, they don't make for the best girlfriends and or wives. And as such, they aren't considered as great options. So these guys want to go to third world countries and pick them up. Which, when you kind of explain it, and at least when I kind of thought about it a little bit, this is almost, like an international version of what used to be the kienyeji versus broiler debate. Or, to put it into the simpler terms that I think a lot of us grown people who've been born in the 90s can relate to, the whole go to the village and find a village girl and leave the city ones alone because they're very immoral and they don't have good values. Like, if you probably have ever had this debate growing up, then if it was like a live audience, I'd tell you to raise your hand. But I feel like a lot of people have had this before, more so guys, where there was this old mentality and mindset where instead of going to find a partner from the city that you're in where you're working, you are supposed to go to your village and then they will find someone for you from a good family, or you just go to the village, find a good babe, and then bring them to the city and make them your wife and have them settle down here. Like, that's pretty much the same exact thing as what passport bros do, except that for passport bros, whatever the hell they're doing is on an international scale, and for ours it was more on like a regional or a national scale. And to kind of think about it, like, we know exactly why the hell that shit backfired here, so are we really surprised that whatever the hell these so-called passport bros are doing here is backfiring as well? Like, when you kind of think about it at this point in time, like, it actually starts to make sense. It's not even that hard to actually describe, and I feel like after saying this I could even end the episode here, because it pretty much just seems like term for term, when you look at the general similarities, pretty much the same exact thing. And then now you add the fact that this is someone from a land that you don't know, that you barely know, you probably haven't even been hooked up by someone that you have some sort of, simple friendship or relationship with. You've pretty much just gone and selected a random human being, which is even worse than how us guys would do it, or at least how guys would talk about doing it back in the day in our cases. Because like when us guys were doing the whole, go to the village and get yourself a girl and bring her to the city and shit, like a lot of times we'd go to the village and we'd talk to someone from the village to get us a girl. Or our relatives would find a girl for us to go and interact with who's from like a good family and shit. Like, that's normally what would happen. But it wasn't particularly common that someone would talk about just going to a village and randomly picking a village girl. But in this particular case of the passport bros, that's exactly what they're doing. And then you take that, you add the fact that these guys spend barely any time together, really getting to know each other. When they're physically next to each other, then all of a sudden this man is up and out of the place, supposedly thinking that he has a girlfriend or potential wife. And then he actually hopes that this woman is going to stay loyal. She's going to want to be with him for all time. She's not going to go and start fucking around and shit. And you actually see this as an actual possibility that's in someone's mind, which kind of begs the question, do these people actually not know that we consume their content as well? That babes in third world countries can also cheat? But you kind of look at the way these guys are approaching it, and you combine their ego and their ignorance to certain things, and then on top of that, throw in the mindset that comes with being a passport bro. And to be very honest, I actually don't even sympathize with them. I actually feel nothing. And I'm not saying this because I'm some bitter guy whose country's women are being taken or anything. By all means, we have a fuck ton of women. Come and try pick as many as you want. But the reality of it is, let's be real. This is a form of exploitation. And they're using the power of their currency and, the belief that their country is so modern and ours is so backward and shit, to try and score themselves a babe that is going to treat them like a small god. That's pretty much where the idea of being the passport bro comes from. When you kind of look at it at its core, that's pretty much what these guys try to do. And the unfortunate reality of it is, for a number of these passport bros, it seems like their version of exploitation is being exploited against them, and now they're the ones that are losing. And while you do want to feel sorry for the guy, at the same time, you're kind of like, what exactly did you expect? You decide to come to the country, you spend all of a month and a half or some shit, or a couple of weeks, you get to know one babe, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my goodness, I want to spend the rest of my life with this woman. Then you go back to your country and you're sending a little bit of money, or you continue trying to support this babe, and you have some sort of long distance relationship, hoping that this person will stay loyal to you because you're this guy from this first world country that'll want to marry her and move her to that first world country. Because why would she want that again? Let's be real about some shit over here. If it was a babe in your country, you'd have probably at least tried to be in a relationship with her for 3 years, if not more, before you chose to settle down. You've come and spent all of a couple of months at the very most with a single babe, of which the rest of it you're spending it miles away, thousands of miles away from this person, and you are hoping that this person will want to spend the rest of their lives with you. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but don't you think that being taken advantage of was going to happen by default? You barely know this person. They could be all of any number of people, but they just decided to play a facade for a couple of weeks, and you just want to settle down and, start a family with this person. Are you very, very serious about that shit? And honestly, I feel like this is a big part of the reason why this shit is almost always going to fail. This belief that, if I go to a third world country, I can go and pick up a nice babe who'll be submissive to me and all, because the women in my vicinity aren't going to be submissive. I'm not saying that stick to your place or anything, it's just, don't think that just because this is someone from a third world country, that they're not going to have access to the same kind of content that your women consume, that they won't have the same standards that your women have, that they won't want things the same way your women want them. So for you to think that they'll be completely submissive or treat you like a small king just because you have a stronger currency, I think is a little bit dumb, to say the least. Although then again, considering that I didn't do this entire episode just to make it a rant, I at least want to come in and try and help the fellas that do actually want to be passport bros. Because I know that there's guys that still want to do this shit, but they probably didn't tune into this episode just to hear someone talk shit about them. Because I'm assuming that that's what some of them are probably thinking right about now. So, to give you guys a little bit of advice, at least deal with Nairobi women and find yourself a good one. I would say avoid places where alcohol is being passed around a lot. So don't expect to find a wife or a potential long-term girlfriend at the club or at a hotel bar. Like, that shit isn't going to happen. And I'd say, in as much as yes, finding someone who stays at the hotel or works at the hotel is a good idea, I'd probably ask that you try and look a little bit further. Go to a church or some sort of religious institution, because I'm sure that the ones that want to fleece you off of cash probably don't go there all that often. A lot of them don't really like going to church all that much, so you might actually have a lot better chances there. Then also, the ones that go for singles events and fun group activities like hiking. Like, there's not that many babes that are like, let's go hiking so that we can go and look for rich foreigners who can possibly give us cash when they leave. So there's a pretty good chance that you might actually bag yourself a pretty good babe from there. And the second piece of advice that I'd probably give you, and this one is probably harder than the first, actually try and spend a lot more time here than what it is that you guys are still doing. This whole thing of coming and staying for a month and picking up a babe and now having some sort of long distance relationship, bullshit. Stay a little bit longer. Or alternatively, if you are going to plan your stay for not too long, plan for something around 3 months, and whenever you're interacting with a babe, do not tell her how long you're going to be around. Just say you've come for work. Like, as long as you don't say that it's a short-term stay or anything, or you're supposed to be leaving on such and such a date, for the most part, it might actually open up the opportunities for you to actually interact with some people that are good, not just a babe that wants to fleece you for cash. Then the moment you do that, at least if you leave and you come back periodically every couple of months or so, it might actually not be all that bad for you. But to be completely honest, the chances of you getting a good long-term partner from a quote-unquote third world country is probably a pipe dream for a lot of you guys. Because the reality of it is, while you guys think that yes, you coming to a third world country to exploit the fact that it's probably poorer so you can pick a babe who's more submissive and she can turn you into like this small god of hers and she'll worship the very feet that you're walking might seem nice, these babes have found out that they can pretty much give the impression that they're going to do that just to fleece you off of cash. So while you're trying to exploit them and their situation, they're also exploiting you and your situation, putting yourself in a position where you have zero idea and you're pretty much not interacting. And about that, I actually forgot to add a small piece of advice, which is also interact with the locals and not necessarily just the workers. Interact with people that are somewhere around your level within that same area, and they might actually help you a little bit more. But with all of that said and done, let me just conclude by saying something that I had mentioned about Passport Bros a couple of episodes ago. People, just because you think that you're coming to a third world country to get a babe doesn't mean that we haven't consumed your content and picked up a lot of your cultural practices and beliefs in relation to dating and sex and other societal things that people usually talk about out here. So when you're coming here, don't expect that the babe will be completely submissive and will not give a damn about your money so long as you provide the food and give her a nice roof to live under. Like, that ship's actually sailed. But then again, I might be wrong about all of this shit, but I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open on IG, on Facebook, it is at Breaktime, on my side, on Twitter, it is at Bagaka the D. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.